Thank you very much, Mr. Pung. And now I'd like to invite the Deputy Premier of New South Wales, Andrew Stoner, MP, Minister for Trade and Investment and Minister for Regional Infrastructure and Services, for the launch of the University of Sydney and KPMG report, Australia-China Agribusiness Outlook. Many thanks.
Well, thank you, Kerry, and good afternoon, and to our friends from China, ni hao, and welcome to Sydney. The Sydney-China Business Forum has become a signature event for Australia-China government and business collaboration. It plays a vital role in encouraging greater discussion and understanding around the issues that unite our two great nations. I'm particularly grateful to Dr. Michael Spence, the Vice-Chancellor and Principal at the University of Sydney, for his kind invitation to speak with you today. The university's China Studies Centre is a fantastic example of the contribution made by our universities and research institutions, both here in New South Wales and in China, to improving our government, trade and cultural relationships. And it's quite a coincidence that I've arrived in time to hear my friend from the consulate, the economic counsellor, Mr. Pung, to deliver his very good speech and his exhortation to you all to wake up. In fact, just yesterday I was with Mr. Pung's boss, the Consul General, Mr. Lee, as we welcomed into Sydney the first ever A380 aircraft from China. And it was just terrific to see that aircraft arrive at our international airport here in Sydney, bringing lots and lots of visitors, tourists and business people from China. In fact, we estimate that this new daily A380 service will contribute something like 5,000 jobs and $390 million worth of benefit to the New South Wales economy through those increased visitor numbers. And in fact, I was delighted to note that at the time that China has in fact overtaken New Zealand as our greatest source of tourists here in New South Wales. And that in fact, of all the Chinese visitors coming to Australia, 61.2% arrive here in Sydney. So we've got a very strong connection. I also thought, while Mr. Pung was speaking, that the last time that we met, we actually sat down to lunch, not very far from here, at quite a good Sichuan restaurant, prior to which we had lunch at the New South Wales Parliament. And you see, this is actually quite symbolic. The relationship is about friendship, and I think I can call Mr. Pung a friend. We sit down and we do business in the traditional Chinese way, which is usually over a meal. I think it's a wonderful tradition, by the way. We should always adopt this in Australia. And we were served very good quality Australian, make that New South Wales produce from our agribusiness. And that had value added to it by the very good Chinese chefs with their Chinese expertise. So we were doing business, and in fact we were converting some good Australian agri-product into a very enjoyable meal and driving a closer relationship. And I must say the meal was a little warm. I like that Sichuan food. Look, I understand that you heard from our state's Premier, Barry O'Farrell, this morning, and I'm confident that one very strong message that you would have heard from Mr. O'Farrell is this: that New South Wales is most definitely open for business with China. China is one of the most important and fastest growing international markets for Australia. And as Mr. Pung mentioned, it is our number one two-way trading partner for New South Wales. And in fact, for the New South Wales-China two-way trade relationship, that has grown at an average of 15% per year over the last 5 years. Pretty spectacular figures. And I'm in a strong position to testify to the very strong relationship that New South Wales does have with China. In fact, just last week, I missed that A380 plane by 3 days, by the way. I was in Guangzhou to reaffirm the sister state relationship we have with Guangdong province. I met there with the governor. We talked about the fact that next year marks 35 years for that sister state relationship. It is the first for Guangdong province. It is the first for New South Wales. In fact, I understand the first sister state relationship in Australia. And New South Wales did that 35 years ago with Guangdong province. And in fact, I understand that the signatory in Guangzhou at the time was none other than the President Xi's father, who signed as the then party secretary for Guangdong province. And I was there in Guangzhou meeting with the governor to strengthen that sister state relationship further with next year's 25th Joint Economic Meeting here in Sydney. I also took the opportunity to promote to not only the government but also to business New South Wales credentials as a very attractive location, not only for investment but also for study. In terms of investment, we very much welcome the decision by the new Australian federal government to prioritise the finalisation of a free trade agreement with China. We believe this will help New South Wales in our efforts to realise the opportunities and potential for closer engagement with our number one two-way trading partner. Chinese direct investment in particular has been essential in the development of many Australian industries that have driven our export growth, including in large-scale projects to meet demand for resources such as iron ore and coal. However, as the research from KPMG and the University of Sydney in the Demystifying Chinese Investment in Australia Agribusiness report that I'm releasing today confirms, China accounts for just a small proportion of foreign direct investment in New South Wales and in Australia. The report shows that in 2012, agriculture accounted for just 2% of Chinese investment into Australia. It also shows that at the end of 2012, China was only the 9th largest foreign agricultural investor in Australia. And that's well behind US investment, which is nearly 10 times that of China, the UK, Japan, and even Singapore. Now, in an outgoing address to business leaders last month, the former Chinese Consul General in Perth, Madame Wang Yine, urged Australia to look beyond the mining boom for new areas of growth. She said, and I quote, "The potential for agribusiness cooperation between China and Australia is great." And she's right, because as this research report shows, the opportunity for future growth in this sector is remarkable. The report also highlights the complexity of the issue, and in this sense, it makes a significant and timely contribution, providing valuable data and content to further inform the discussion. And this is a discussion we need to have to help both our nations address common challenges. China feeds nearly 3 times the number of people per area unit of land as the rest of the world, which is an outstanding achievement. However, and again as Mr. Peng mentioned, growth in demand from the Chinese middle classes for more protein in the diet, as well as land and water resource constraints, make production increases a challenge. Here in Australia, we too face challenges around land use, the need for increasing productivity and ensuring sustainability, which I understand has been a topic for discussion this afternoon. We see the global issue of food security as very real, with world population projected to reach 9 billion by 2050. And just as food security is important to us, we understand that it is to other nations, including China. New South Wales and Australian agricultural companies are internationally renowned for being clean and green, thanks to our stringent quarantine policies and our sound management practices. And our determination in New South Wales is to continue to build a thriving primary industry sector and to manage our natural resources for future generations. And we know that this needs greater investment. And central to our future success in this will be our ability to collaborate with other nations, including China. Now, as I've mentioned, the report provides useful background to the negotiations around a free trade agreement between China and Australia. As the Australian Prime Minister, Mr Abbott, confirmed at the APEC summit in Bali earlier this month, there is now renewed urgency behind the negotiations. A more efficient and sustainable trade and investment relationship, one which is not affected by current market distortions, is an economic imperative for New South Wales. And a free trade agreement is the best opportunity we have to address that issue. We will continue, as we have for many years, to facilitate direct business and research linkages, but we need to balance that approach with a focus on completing that free trade agreement. The report is also a call for action to us here in New South Wales and Australia. Australian agribusiness does face a number of challenges, including issues around farm profitability as well as labour. It's refreshing to have an Australian federal government that understands the importance of migration, including the 457 visa, to the growth of priority sectors like agriculture. And the report could not be timelier. Our state government has recently commissioned an industry task force to develop an industry action plan which will ensure that New South Wales' agricultural sector is prepared for future growth while addressing the challenges now and into the future, such as the need to increase our agricultural production to meet a range of consumer preferences and expectations with greater constraints on resources. I'm pleased to inform you also that next week our New South Wales Minister for Primary Industries or Agriculture, the Honourable Katrina Hodgkinson, will in fact be visiting China on an agribusiness trade mission. Also of relevance to this seminar is the fact that our federal government has recently announced its intention to produce a national agricultural white paper. So this sector is getting the attention and the priority that it deserves from both the state and federal governments. I want to congratulate KPMG and the University of Sydney for their ongoing work to inform some of the key issues material to Australia-China relations. And it's now my great pleasure to officially launch Demystifying Chinese Investment in Australian Agribusiness here at today's 2013 Sydney-China Business Forum. Thank you. 谢谢.